Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Friday video. I know I mentioned in the last update video that Fridays won't be dedicated to Overwatch, but because I'm still working things out and seeing what works and what doesn't, I'm going to just be sticking with Overwatch for this week. In the future, of course, I plan on changing that potentially, but we'll see how it goes. But today, I will be talking about 5 characters within the Overwatch lore that I could see being added into the game as playable heroes in the future. Now, in order to be considered for the list, the character cannot be currently playable for obvious reasons and has to exist somewhere in the lore. So what that means is, if they have appeared in terms of name, if they've physically appeared in some form, in some comic or an animated short, anything, just if they were mentioned or if they've been seen, even if they don't have a name but we've seen them, they could be included. What that means is that some of the character ideas that were planned before the game's release, that were never completed, that have not been worked into the lore in any way, have not been considered for this list and cannot appear on this list. So with that out of the way, let's get into the list and start at number 5. For number 5, we have some of these minor Overwatch members. Now, throughout the entirety of the game's lifespan, in terms of the teasers and all the other stuff in the original trailers, we've seen tons of different images for characters that have ties to Overwatch in terms of membership, usually, or just ones that were mentioned that maybe Overwatch went up against in some form in the past, and we just haven't seen them. So there's a lot of characters that are involved there, and I know this is 5 characters, and I'm mentioning a bunch here, but none of them really, I think, fit in terms of having their own spot on this list, because a lot of characters that I think have better chances and would be better suited in terms of existing already, but there's a lot of them. And if you watch the recall short, there's a part at the end of the short where Winston hits the recall button and starts cycling through a bunch of pictures with names and whatnot of a bunch of different heroes. Or not heroes, characters. Including that is Kimiko and Mirembe, who also appear in the Ana Legacy comic, which is the one where Ana loses her eye. You see them, Kimiko has 3 kids, we know Mirembe's husband was battling cancer, so we know some stuff about these characters. We know they're a part of Overwatch, and we know that they were just normal agents. You have Emre Sarioglu, who was mentioned in the Operation White Dome post about where Torbjorn lost his eye and his arm. You have Ray, who is the pilot of the Orca. You have Theo, who is the pilot that we hear in the Retribution event. There's a bunch of different heroes and whatnot that are mentioned, or just characters in general that are mentioned having been involved with Overwatch. And I really think there's a good chance that some of them could eventually be added as heroes. We know, of course, that, as I mentioned in the intro, that there were characters and heroes planned that never made it. Some of them could be what we see with heroes in the future, and some of them could just be some of these teased people or these people mentioned in some form, and I think that there's a good chance that some of these characters could appear in the future as playable heroes in Overwatch. Coming up next at number 4 is Hammond. Hammond is a former test subject at Horizon Lunar Colony, along with Winston, of course, who was a smaller subject, so most likely a chimpanzee, or just a monkey instead of a gorilla like Winston and most of the other test subjects. Hammond went missing at one point before the actual uprising took place, and no one actually knows what happened to Hammond. No one knows where he is, but eventually when Liu Chang Interstellar had a kind of station readout, because they could track specimens who were in the station, both Winston and Hammond were not located. So where could Hammond be? Is Hammond in the station? Or did Hammond get off the station with Winston? Or did he leave separately from Winston? We don't know where Hammond is, but I think Hammond could make a very interesting hero. I wouldn't expect Hammond to be a tank or a support. Support especially, I don't think we would ever get a chimpanzee monkey hero as a support. We could, but I don't see it happening. And we've gotten so many supports recently that I don't see the need for another one. But I think a DPS is possible. I don't know if he would, punch, if he would use some kind of, weapon. I think it would be interesting if he could climb. I mean, chimpanzees are relatively good climbers. Maybe not as fast as Genji and Hanzo can, but maybe he'd be able to climb more surfaces. Maybe he'd be able to kind of climb, more rough surfaces, because if you're Genji or Hanzo, you can only really climb a flat surface, but maybe he'd be able to climb something that's a little bit more tough to climb. I don't know really what they would do with Hammond, but I think Hammond could definitely be a very interesting hero going forward, and I would like to see what potential there is for Hammond as a hero. I know the community is really big on Hammond. I know the community has said a lot about Hammond becoming a hero. I never would have put Hammond on this list had I not seen how many people had actually some pretty good ideas for Hammond as a hero, and just talking about Hammond as much as they have. I feel like Hammond would have been a relatively forgotten character, but we're sitting here with the potential for Hammond to be a hero. I think it would be very interesting. So until we find out more about Hammond, I and many others will continue to talk about the potential for Hammond to be one of the next heroes in Overwatch. For number 3, we have Sanjay Corporal. Now, Sanjay Corporal is a member of the Vishkar Corporation, which is the same company that Symmetra is involved with, and Sanjay's first appearance was actually in the Symmetra comic A Better World, where Sanjay had Symmetra infiltrating a rival corporation to try to find dirt on them so that they could win a bid to help rebuild Rio de Janeiro instead of the other company. When Symmetra didn't find anything, Sanjay actually had the rival company's building blow up, and we later find out that Sanjay is a member of the Talon Inner Council, as seen in both the Doomfist Masquerade comic and in the Moira's origin story video. So we know that Sanjay is in league with Talon and is a relatively important person in the Vishkar Corporation, which makes for a very interesting hero, and it's a very interesting dynamic with some of the other heroes, specifically Symmetra, Doomfist, Moira, Reaper. You could have a lot of really cool stuff in there, and he would be a very behind-the-scenes member of Talon, much like, say, Maximilian is. Now, I would think that there's a potential for Sanjay to use the same kind of light-bending technology that we see Symmetra use. I would assume it would be used somewhat differently, but I would expect that we would see it. And when I think about Sanjay, one of the reasons why I picked Sanjay instead of, say, Maximilian, is I don't think Maximilian would ever really be involved in fighting for Talon. I think he's just kind of the money backer. He's just the businessman for Talon. He kind of makes sure that Talon has the money that they need, and he's going to make the deals for them. He's kind of the brains behind everything, and he's the treasurer, let's say. Sanjay I could see as one of the kind of builders. He kind of helps them build things up, and he kind of helps them get involved in things that normally they wouldn't be able to. And I'd say there's a potential for Sanjay to be a tank. There is no tank yet in Talon, at least in terms of the heroes, other than, we've seen that heavy assault dude from the Retribution event. But I could see him being like a tank, and using light bending to create shields and barriers of some kind. And I think he'd be a very interesting hero. The one thing I do think hurts his chances at being a hero, as say maybe the next hero, is that Symmetra is getting a rework, and if they're focusing on Symmetra as the Vishkar Corporation representative right now, and they want to make sure Symmetra is fitting in, I think maybe they'd hold off on adding another light bending character, just so they can make sure that they can separate the two and make sure the two of them have unique abilities and they don't feel too similar. So with the shield barrier or shield generator being removed as one of Symmetra's ultimate abilities, and just abilities in general, there is a potential for that to be what Sanjay gets as an ability. maybe not, because it is kind of similar in a way to what Brigitte has. I mean, obviously, Shield Generator was a limited range, but we'll see. I'm interested in seeing where the potential for Sanjay goes. I'm interested in seeing where Sanjay's story in general goes, but in terms of his chances as an Overwatch hero, I do think the chance is very high, and I would love to see him added into the game in the future to be playable. At number 2, we have one of the characters with the most speculation surrounding them in the entirety of the Overwatch lore, Liao. Now, if you don't know who Liao is, I can't blame you, because we know very little about Liao. All we know is that Liao was one of the original 6 members of the Overwatch strike team. The other 5 being Jack Morrison, aka Soldier 76, Gabriel Reyes, aka Reaper, Anna Amari, Reinhardt Wilhelm, and Torbjorn Lindholm. It was those 5 and Liao. We know nothing about Liao. We don't know if Liao is alive. We don't know if Liao is dead. We don't know if Liao is a male, a female, what role they've fulfilled in the team. We know absolutely nothing, which makes Liao such a perfect character to be a hero. Now, the reason why Liao's not number 1 is because we know so little about Liao that there's really kind of no real way to place anything specifically down, which is good in a way, because you can literally make any type of character you want into Liao. The Overwatch team has mentioned in the past that they first design a character or a hero as a specific type of hero, then they start to give that hero a character and a backstory and kind of flesh all that out. One of the benefits to Liao is that you can just kind of plan whatever kind of hero you want, and when you have one that starts to work, you can say, okay, well, let's make this Liao. So, Liao could fulfill almost any role. I don't know if Liao would be a DPS hero, just because the original Overwatch team already has Soldier 76 and Reaper, who are both DPS heroes. Torbjorn's a defense hero, but his whole thing is building turrets and all that kind of stuff, so that's still very damage-based. So I could see him either being a tank or a support. I don't think he would be a sniper, because Ana was a sniper. So I think support or tank would be likely, but also if it was like a unique kind of defense hero, there's options for what Liao could be. Liao could literally be anything, though, which I think is interesting. But because there's so little about Liao, and there's so little to go off of for Liao's character, I just don't want to put Liao at number 1, because for all we know, Liao could be dead. And for all we know, Liao could have been injured, and that wheelchair that we see in Horizon Lunar Colony could actually belong to Liao, because Liao's now a respectable businessman. So we don't know anything about Liao, and for that reason, I don't want to put Liao at number 1, because we just don't know enough about Liao to say for certain that Liao could become a hero going forward. But I think there's a very good chance that Liao does become a hero going forward, and I wouldn't be surprised if Liao is the next hero, or even the hero after that, but I definitely think at some point in the future we will be seeing Liao as a playable hero. When it comes to number 1, I wanted to think about which character in the lore do I think just makes the most sense, following some of the patterns we've seen in the past with some of the heroes that we got. So I decided to take a look at the last 3 heroes, which would be, of course, Brigitte, Moira, and Doomfist, and kind of look at their build-up before they were released. So, Moira, I'm going to start with her, is a very interesting one, because we only knew about Moira from one little background appearance in the Doomfist Masquerade comic. We knew nothing else about her. She's kind of hard to pinpoint, and it's hard to think of a hero exactly like that ever being a thing again, so I just kind of thought, alright, well, let's see what else we have with Brigitte and Doomfist. Now, Doomfist was teased from the very beginning. We saw the Doomfist gauntlet in the original Overwatch cinematic trailer. Doomfist was teased with Numbani, and of course with Orisa, and Doomfist has kind of been building up for a long time as this big character, and then of course eventually we got Doomfist as a hero, and no one was surprised. Brigitte is where I'm really looking for this, because I think Brigitte gives us the best look at what we could be getting for future heroes based on characters from the lore. Brigitte was shown in several different places. We saw Brigitte in the Reinhardt Dragonslayer comic. We saw Brigitte in the Tracer Reflections comic. We saw Brigitte in the Reinhardt animated short. And then eventually we got Brigitte released. So I think, well, what kind of character in the lore has one of the most developed lore, and it appears in several different places, and could really, I think, realistically be a hero? Sanjay appears a lot in the lore. Of course, Maximilian appears a lot in the lore. Sanjay, I just think, because of Symmetra, is not as likely, and I don't think Maximilian will ever become a hero. But someone who I do think will become a hero is the Queen of Junkertown. The Queen of Junkertown has a ton of references or appearances, whether they be direct or indirect. She is referenced several times, or very prominently, in one of the web comics, which is the one that focuses on Junkrat and Roadhog, specifically Roadhog, but it is the comic Junkertown Wasted Land, and that focuses primarily on Roadhog, and it's kind of how Roadhog and Junkrat meet. It's a pretty good comic. I like it, but in that we see that a bunch of the Junkertown Queen's goons are sent after something that Junkrat has. They want his information, so they go after him. Then, of course, we see posters of her in the Junkertown map, and we hear her voice in the Junkertown map. So we have a very good idea as to what the Junkertown Queen looks like and what she could be as a hero. In the poster of her, we see that she has kind of an axe, mace-like weapon. No, I believe it is supposed to be an axe, and we obviously already have, Reinhardt, who has a hammer, and skins where that hammer is an axe, and, we have Brigitte, who's new, who's a melee hero, so, would they want to add another one? Well, I don't see why they wouldn't, and I think an interesting thing they could do with Junkertown Queen is give her kind of two different weapons. The only real character we have at the moment with two different weapons that you can swap between is Mercy with the staff and her pistol, and Torbjorn, of course, with the hammer and his gun. So those two are the only ones that can swap between weapons, at least off the top of my head. So I think it'd be interesting if we had the Junkertown Queen, who maybe has a handgun or like a really slow rifle that doesn't do a ton of damage, and most of the damage that the Queen of Junkertown does is with her hammer, axe, mace thing. But if at range, she can pull out a secondary firearm and kind of use it to fend off enemies that are not too close, so that way she can get damage off. She can kind of help faraway enemies in some way, but then also her main damage comes from this big axe, because she was a gladiator formerly, and then she rose up to become the Queen of Junkertown. So I think there's a lot of really cool things you could do with the Queen of Junkertown. We already have voice lines for her. She already speaks. There's already so much that has gone into her as a character. So much so, the only other character that has voice lines in the game is Athena. I don't see Athena becoming a hero anytime soon. Or I should say voice lines in the game that aren't event-based or, situation-based. And, the only other character that is, really kind of prominent in any form, in voicing in any way, is Katya Volskaya, who I also don't see ever becoming a hero. So I think the Junkertown Queen has a really good chance of being the next hero. I think there's a lot of really interesting things you could do with the Queen of Junkertown, and I'm super excited for the potential of the Junkertown Queen becoming Overwatch's next hero. With all that being said, that concludes my list of my 5 characters from the Overwatch lore that I think have the best chance of being added into the game as heroes. If you have different opinions than me, which I'm sure you do, leave those in the comments down below. I'd like to have a discussion if you think that I maybe had one lower than you think, or if I didn't mention one that you think, if you actually were to put it this way, if the hero was made this way, they could work, or if you think that I put someone way too high, let me know. I'd love to have a discussion. in the comments down below. I really love to hear what you have to say about the potential for characters to be added in the future. But I'm going to sign off. If you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing, and of course comment if you want to further this discussion. And until next time, I am out of here. Bye bye!